we're in an age of images. So everything is images now. There's everywhere you look, there's pictures, there's images. I read in an article that the average person today sees more images in one day than somebody 200 years ago saw in their entire lifetime. And if you think about just people scrolling through and looking at all these images, one of the things that the ancients really knew is that the images, that they don't go away. They're actually retained in you. And so right now you can close your eyes and actually see things that you saw years ago. Especially powerful images have a lasting impact because they're almost like they're etched on the soul. And that's why trauma is so difficult, because one of the things that when people sleep, when they go to sleep at night, they have this rapid eye movement. They call it REM sleep. And that rapid eye movement is like the eye erasing what it saw throughout the day, all the images. And what happens with trauma is that it's etched in. It's not like most of the things that happen in our life, it's like writing on a chalkboard. It's easy to erase it. But those traumatic events in our lifetime, they're like chiseled in stone. And so it becomes much more difficult to get those. And that's why people have recurring dreams when they've had trauma. They close their eyes and they relive the trauma that they experienced. Seeing things is really has a powerful effect on people. And I don't think people realize that a lot of the sickness that we have going on has to do with what's going into them, because whatever you put in is going to affect you. The heart is going to be affected by it. And in fact, years ago at the Reviving the Islamic Spirit in Toronto, I did an event with Pamela Paul, which was called The Rape of the Heart, which was about pornography and the effects of pornography on people. And that came from, I had not known the extent of, I was gone for a long time overseas, and when I came back, I did not know the extent of the pervasiveness of pornography in the culture. Pornography has been around. In Pompeii, if you go to Rome, there's a seaside resort of the ancient Romans called Pompeii. And that was basically the Las Vegas of ancient Rome. It's where they went to literally just do what happens in Pompeii stays in Pompeii. That's where the Romans went to do their facade. One of the things about that place is that they worshiped the phallus. So houses had like a phallus, and there's a museum. You can go there now. I mean, I wouldn't recommend it, but you can go there now, and it's all the murals that were in the homes of these wealthy Pompeians, and it's all pornography. I mean, literally pornography. And so they covered their walls in pornography. And it's very interesting that they're literally, you can see the people, they're covered in this volcanic ash, and they're there, like literally, and a lot of them are in prostration because it came so fast and it just destroyed them. And Pompeii to me is a real sign. It's just a sign for people. You can believe or not believe, that's people's prerogative. But for those of us who actually believe that there are consequences to our actions, Pompeii is a sign of God. So they were a pornographic culture, Pompeii. And when a culture becomes pornographic, and by that, porne in Greek means prostitute, and graphos means writing. So pornography is the writing of people that sell themselves for sex. And so gigolo or prostitute, I mean, it's a man or a woman, because in this culture there's it's all equal opportunity facade. So they don't, back in the 60s when I was young, the feminists were complaining about the billboards where they sexualized women and sold things. So the advertisers said, "You're right." So now they sexualize the men too. So now you see the Calvin Klein, underwear ads and things like this. And this is, instead of just recognizing these things aren't healthy for people, no, let's just sexualize the whole atmosphere. So the culture is becoming increasingly sexualized. And young people are exposed early and earlier to sexuality. And this is why people that are on the internet, they're going to eventually be exposed to things. Things will pop up on the internet. It's a very dangerous place for people to wander about. So part of our tradition, and really all these ancient traditions, have to do with controlling the eyes and really taking control of your eyes. Because when you are looking out constantly, it's like allowing your spiritual energy to be exhausted. So you're dissipating, literally, you're dissipating spiritual energy. And by lowering the eyes, it's actually your soul is being strengthened by that. And the Prophet ﷺ told us that you will find a halawa, a sweetness in your heart, by learning to control your eyes and not looking at things that are prohibited, because there's images that you will see that you won't be able to get them out of your heart. And I know somebody who told me he had watched a lot of pornography before he became Muslim, and then he became Muslim. He told me that every time he got up to do the takbir, the images would come back to him. And that's a proof that Iblis is just working on the hearts of people. So these are things that should concern our community, because unfortunately a lot of the downloads for pornography in the Muslim world are some of the worst in the world. I mean, we have some of the highest searches for pornography in the Muslim, and these Google stats are available, so you can see the total objectification of women that takes place in this. It's so demeaning to objectify the woman. But the reason that I did that is because with Pamela Paul, we participated in a conference together that was at Princeton University with Robert George invited me to this. It was the first time I met him, actually. I was invited by the Witherspoon Institute as a Muslim voice about the problem of pornography. And I delivered a paper on lust because I think that's at the root of the problem. And our tradition always looks at roots of problems instead of just the symptoms. Like pornography is a symptom. The problem is shahwa, is lust, what the Arabs call shabaq. I heard her speak there, and she had written a book called Pornified, which I later read. But what really struck me, and her book was very interesting, but what really struck me was a neuroscientist who gave a presentation on the neuroplasticity and the effects of pornography on the brain. And he basically showed how brains are actually rewired for people that watch a lot of pornography. And one of the things that he said, which really struck me as terrifying, was he said that people that watch pornography don't realize that they're in a state of heightened stimulation. And because there are male and female images in the pornography, the brain gets rewired so that they can actually begin to have homoerotic impulses. And then another thing that Pamela Paul points out in her book is that she noted that many of the people that she interviewed admitted that after several years of addiction to pornography, that they would actually fall into child pornography. Because one of the things about the self is that the nafs, if you keep, one of the things Imam al-Busayri says, he says, don't try to fight your appetite by giving into it. Inna ta'ama yuqawwi shahwata nahmi, that food will only strengthen the desire of the glutton. So it gets worse and worse. It won't, by giving into it, you're not going to break it. You're actually going to get worse and worse. Now, that's a major problem. And so I did this, and what really troubled me was after the lecture that I gave at the RIS, all of these women came up to me as how their husbands were addicted to pornography and they didn't know what to do. And I'm thinking, this is a real problem in our community that people aren't really addressing. And this was years ago. And I don't think people realize the dangers of these things, because what happens with sinfulness generally is people kind of go onto, if they're believers, they're going to go onto a kind of automatic pilot, because there's a cognitive dissonance, like they know it's wrong. And so they'll go onto a kind of automatic pilot, and they'll fall into these things. And then there's this constant demonic assault, basically. I mean, it's a demonic assault. So I think people have to realize, one, here's the single most important thing to realize is that if you are in any tribulation like this, that you can get out of it. There's nothing in this dunya of sinfulness except that you can overcome it. But it takes supernatural power for people that are in the grip of something like this. And that's why you have to call on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You have to rely on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you have to understand that the war that we have, this war between the demonic realm and between the angelic realm, this war, this battle that's being waged constantly is a war of attrition, that we wear down our enemy or he wears us down. It's one or the other. But if you're with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you will win the battle. That the victory is promised. In tansurullah yansurkum. If you will help God, if you will help God by following the dictates that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us and doing these things, He will help you. But this is the quid pro quo. You have to, if you go towards God a handspan, He will come to you, right? A dhira', shibrun dhira'. If you go by a dhira', He'll come by a ba', right? If you go walking, He comes running, metaphorically. But the point is that Allah will do far more than what you do. But you have to make that effort.